Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was from family of skilled assassins who have weak quirks had similar quirk to his mother's, but instead of attracting small items he can control small items from bullets, arrows, knives and many small projectiles. Excellent marksman, swordsman, and archery plus many martial arts trained. Since his quirk manifested, he is confident and not nervous. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world, for Izuku Midoriya, was a collection of trajectories. It was the subtle arc of a falling leaf, the sharp, predictable line of a thrown stone, the chaotic dance of dust motes in a sunbeam. To others, these were background noise. To him, they were a language he had been taught to speak since birth. The air in the dojo was thick with the scent of tatame, aged wood, and the faint, metallic tang of ozone. It was a sterile, sacred space hidden beneath the unassuming facade of their suburban home. Here, there was no Izuku, the quiet student. Here, there was only the heir to the Yamikage legacy. He stood perfectly still, his breathing a slow, controlled rhythm that barely disturbed the fabric of his black training gi. His green eyes, so often perceived as wide and innocent by outsiders, were narrowed into analytical slits, tracking not his opponent, but the space around him. His opponent was his father, Hisashi Midoriya. A man with a thin, almost scholarly build and a quirk most would deem comically useless, firecracker breath. He could exhale small, superheated pellets of air. They weren't powerful enough to start a major fire or cause serious harm, but they moved with the speed of a projectile. For the Yamikage, that was more than enough. Focus, Izuku. Hisashi's voice was calm, a teacher's cadence. Your mind is a lens. Do not let it fog. Izuku gave a short, sharp nod. He extended his senses, a mental net cast into the immediate vicinity. This was the core of his quirk, an evolution of his mother's simple attraction of small objects. He couldn't just pull things towards him. He could command them. Push, pull, twist, halt. He was a conductor, and every loose object smaller than his fist was his orchestra. He named it projectile control. Hiss thwip, Hisashi exhaled. A tiny, shimmering bead of heat shot through the air, aimed directly at Izuku's chest. An untrained eye wouldn't even have seen it. Izuku didn't move his body. Instead, his focus snapped to a small, ornamental throwing needle resting on a nearby weapons rack. The 1-ounce steel needle lifted into the air, a silver dart of pure intent, and streaked across the dojo. Tink! The sound was no louder than a key striking a lock. His needle met his father's heated pellet midair, deflecting it harmlessly into the reinforced wall where it sizzled out with a tiny puff of smoke. Sloppy, Hisashi critiqued instantly, already taking a new stance. You used the weapon. The test was to use ambient projectiles. A weapon is a crutch when the world itself is an armory. The needle was closer, Izuku replied, his voice even. The most efficient path. Wasted movement is a wasted life. A rare, thin smile touched Hisashi's lips. Acceptable reasoning. But efficiency can breed laziness. Be prepared for when there is no needle. Hiss thwip. Hiss thwip. Hiss thwip. 3 pellets in rapid succession, a triangular pattern designed to force movement. Izuku's eyes flicked to the floor. His quirk latched onto 3 tiny splinters of wood near the edge of the tatami mat. They lifted, spinning like miniature propellers, and shot forward. 2 intercepted their targets. The 3rd pellet, however, was a feint. Hisashi had angled it to curve downwards at the last second. Izuku's body finally moved. It wasn't a panic dodge but a fluid pivot, a motion ingrained through thousands of hours of practice. He flowed around the projectile, his hands snapping out. His quirk pulsed, a gentle push against the air itself, altering the pellet's trajectory just enough for it to sing past his ear. He had used the air particles, the dust, as the finest, most delicate of shields. Better, Hisashi acknowledged, relaxing his stance. The training session was over. Your control over micro-projectiles is improving. But your reliance on sight is still a weakness. A true master feels the trajectory before it is even launched. Izuku bowed deeply. Thank you, father. I will do better. As he straightened up, he felt the familiar, gentle tug of his mother's quirk. A small, cool towel detached itself from a hook by the door and drifted serenely across the room into his waiting hand. Inko Midoriya stood in the doorway, a warm smile on her face that softened the dojo's harsh lines. Her own quirk was simple, but in her, it was an art form of subtle manipulation and grace. She was the one who taught him that a lock could be opened with a paperclip pulled from a guard's pocket from 10 meters away, or a weapon could be disarmed by tugging on a single loose screw. "Dinner is ready," she said, her voice a soothing balm after the intense focus of the spar. "Katsudan. Hisashi, don't push him too hard. The UA exam is in 10 months. He needs to be at his peak, not exhausted." "The Yamakage are never exhausted, my love," Hisashi said, walking over to place a kiss on her cheek. "We endure. We adapt. We overcome." He looked at Izuku, his expression softening from sensei to father. "But she is right. Good work today. Go eat." The transition from the hidden dojo to the warm, brightly lit kitchen above was always a little jarring. One world was shadow, steel, and discipline. The other was the scent of soy sauce, the cheerful hum of the refrigerator, and the soft glow of a television playing hero news in the background. This was the strange duality of Izuku's life. He was being raised to be a weapon, but he was loved with a fierce, unwavering tenderness. The Yamakage clan was not a sprawling organization of faceless killers. They were a single, ancient family line. For centuries, they had been the silent arbiters in the shadows, spies, bodyguards, and, when necessary, assassins for shoguns and industrialists. Their guiding principle was simple: precision over power. They believed a single, perfectly placed needle was more effective than 1,000 wild swings of a sword. This philosophy was born of necessity. The Yamakage bloodline was notorious for producing weak, subtle quirks. They didn't have the genetics for super strength or elemental control. So, they compensated. They became masters of martial arts, swordplay, archery, espionage, and tactics. They honed their minds and bodies into lethal instruments, and their weak quirks became the final, perfect tool in their arsenal. But the age of heroes had changed things. The shadows they operated in were now illuminated by the garish floodlights of primetime hero broadcasts. Their clientele had vanished, replaced by a society that valued flashy, destructive power over quiet, invisible competence. The Yamakage were obsolete, and All Might once again saved the day with a devastating Texas smash, apprehending the notorious Tsunami Gang. The news anchor chirped from the TV. Hisashi made a sound of faint disdain. Collateral damage estimated in the tens of millions. He destroyed 3 city blocks to stop a group of second-rate thugs with a water quirk. It's barbarism disguised as heroism. A sledgehammer cracking a nut. "Now, dear," Inko said, placing a bowl of steaming katsudan in front of Izuku. "He saved lives. That is what matters. He could have saved more, and the city's treasury, by disabling their waterjet equipment with a single, well-aimed shot," Hisashi countered, though without any real heat. It was an old argument. Their methods are crude. This was the reason for Izuku's path. His parents had decided that the Yamakage would not fade into history. They would adapt. They would evolve. If the world now worshipped heroes, then a Yamakage would become the ultimate hero. One who embodied their ideals. One who could solve a crisis with the precision of a surgeon, not the blunt force of a demolition crew. Izuku was that future. His entire life had been a training arc for this single purpose: to enter UA high and redefine heroism from the inside out. "Are you feeling confident about the exam, Izuku?" Inko asked, her eyes full of a mother's worry, a stark contrast to the disciplined matriarch who had taught him how to assemble and disassemble a sniper rifle blindfolded. Izuku took a bite of his food, chewing thoughtfully before answering. "The practicals should be manageable. The targets are robots. Predictable movement patterns, exposed wiring, and hydraulic joints. They're designed to be broken by brute force, which means they'll have exploitable structural weaknesses. It will be a matter of disabling, not destroying." He wasn't nervous. He wasn't arrogant. It was simply an assessment, a mission breakdown. Nerves were a luxury the Yamakage could not afford. They were a fog that clouded the lens. "And the other applicants?" Hisashi pressed. "Unpredictable variables," Izuku admitted. "Most will have powerful, uncontrolled quirks. They will be the sledgehammers. They will cause chaos. And in chaos, there is opportunity. His father nodded, satisfied. Good. Never forget the first lesson, observe everything. The loudest person in the room is often the least dangerous. The true threat is the one you don't notice. The words hung in the air as Izuku finished his meal. He was confident in his skills, in the legacy that flowed through his veins. For 10 months, he continued this routine. Physical conditioning in the morning, academics in the afternoon, and brutal, meticulous training with his parents in the evening. He mastered a dozen different martial arts, became a swordsman of terrifying skill, and could hit a moving target the size of a coin from 200 meters with a bow and arrow. His quirk became an extension of his will, allowing him to manipulate up to 20 small projectiles simultaneously with microscopic accuracy. He was ready. 10 months later, the day of the sludge villain incident, Izuku was walking home from his middle school, a route he had taken 1,000 times. He moved with an economic grace that was unusual for a boy his age, his backpack perfectly balanced, his steps quiet and even. His mind was already breaking down the final parameters for the UA exam, just days away. He had long since learned to ignore the jeers and whispers that had once followed him. Deku, the useless one, the nickname, given to him by his childhood friend turned tormentor, Katsuki Bakugo, had lost its sting years ago. How could it have any meaning when he knew what he was capable of? Bakugo's understanding of strength was as primitive as his explosive quirk, loud, chaotic, and utterly lacking in finesse. Bakugo was a firecracker, loud and bright. Izuku was a rifle shot in the dead of night, unseen, unheard, and infallibly precise. Their paths had diverged completely. Where Bakugo sought validation through dominance, Izuku found it in quiet competence. He no longer saw Bakugo as a bully, but as a tactical problem he had long since solved. Bakugo's movements were aggressive and predictable. His temper was his greatest weakness. He was a textbook example of what his father called a sledgehammer. Powerful, yes, but easily outmaneuvered. An explosion rocked the street ahead, shaking him from his thoughts. A plume of black smoke billowed into the sky. Screams followed. It was the sound of chaos. The sound of opportunity. Izuku broke into a controlled run, his footsteps barely making a sound. He rounded the corner into a shopping district and saw it. A grotesque, writhing creature made of green sludge had taken a hostage and was lashing out, its fluid body igniting gas lines and setting the storefronts ablaze. The heroes on the scene were struggling. Death Arms, a hero known for his super strength, couldn't get a grip on the villain's liquid form. Backdraft was desperately trying to contain the spreading fires, his water quirk a disadvantage against the villain itself. The rookie hero, Kamui Woods, was present but useless. His wooden body was a massive fire hazard. Izuku's eyes scanned the scene, his mind a flurry of calculations. He wasn't seeing a monster, he was seeing a tactical failure. The heroes were all specialists, and none of their specialties applied. They were trying to punch water. Then he saw the hostage. The spiky blonde hair was unmistakable. Katsuki Bakugo. He was trapped, engulfed to his neck in the villain's body, his own explosions going off erratically, only serving to fuel the surrounding fires. There was terror in his eyes, a frantic, desperate fear that Izuku had never seen on his face before. The crowd murmured, helpless. The heroes held their positions, waiting for someone with a more suitable quirk. They were going to let him die. They were following protocol, assessing a situation they were not equipped to handle, and in their hesitation, a life was about to be extinguished. Izuku's father's words echoed in his mind. Wasted movement is a wasted life. In this case, no movement was a guaranteed one. He felt no panic, no surge of adrenaline-fueled recklessness. Instead, a profound, cold clarity settled over him. This was a problem to be solved. A lock to be picked. Objective, rescue hostage. Hostile, sentient fluid, amorphous, susceptible to solid-state trauma. Weak points identified, eyes, mouth, the only solid, consistent features. Assets, pro-heroes, currently ineffective. Civilians, obstacles. Environment, rich and small, hard projectiles. Plan, incapacitate hostile via targeted trauma to sensory organs. Create opening for hostage extraction. His eyes scanned the ground. The street was littered with debris from the explosions. A loose handful of gravel. A heavy-duty screw that had been blasted from a shop sign. A discarded 100 yen coin, glinting in the firelight. Perfect. He didn't run forward screaming. He slipped through the crowd, a shadow moving between bodies, his presence going completely unnoticed. He stopped 30 meters from the villain, well outside the range of its flailing tendrils but well within the effective range of his quirk. He took a single, centering breath. The roar of the fire, the screams of the crowd, the frantic shouts of the heroes, it all faded into a dull hum. His world narrowed to the villain, the hostage, and the 3 small objects he had chosen as his scalpels. His quirk flared to life, an invisible hand. The screw, the coin, and a dozen sharp-edged pieces of gravel lifted from the asphalt. They hovered for a microsecond, vibrating with contained energy. He felt their weight, their shape, their balance. Target 1, left eye. The heavy screw was his choice. It had mass and a pointed tip. Target 2, right eye. The gravel, a shotgun blast of sharp points to maximize coverage and pain. Target 3, mouth/respiratory opening. The coin, for a blunt, shocking impact. Execute. The air split with 3 barely audible zips. The projectiles were not thrown, they were launched. They didn't wobble, they flew with the unerring certainty of guided missiles. The screw struck first. It didn't penetrate deep, but it hit the villain's gelatinous eyeball with the force of a hammer strike. The orb ruptured with a wet squelch. Simultaneously, the cloud of gravel peppered the other eye, shredding the soft surface. The coin hit last, a flat, hard impact right on the villain's gaping mouth, stunning it and momentarily disrupting its attempt to suffocate Bakugo. The sludge villain recoiled with a gurgling, inhuman shriek of agony. Its entire body convulsed. For a single, critical second, its grip on Bakugo slackened. The suffocating sludge pulled back from his mouth and nose. Bakugo gasped, a deep, desperate intake of air. It was the only opening anyone would get, and it was the only opening he needed. A shadow fell over the scene. "I really am pathetic," a booming voice lamented, before resolving into a roar of defiance. Texas Smash, All Might, who had just arrived, moved in a blur. He hadn't needed to fight the villain at full strength anymore. The opening Izuku had created was enough. The wind pressure from his punch was immense, scattering the villain's body like green-tinted rain. The sky, moments before filled with smoke, cleared as the weather itself was changed by the force of the blow. The crowd erupted into cheers. The heroes looked on in awe and relief. Bakugo collapsed to his knees, coughing and gasping. And Izuku, his work done, simply blended back into the stunned crowd, his expression as impassive as ever. He had been the needle, and the situation had been resolved. Later, after the paramedics had checked on Bakugo and the other heroes were giving statements to the press, Izuku was quietly starting to walk away. He had no interest in the accolades, or the attention. The mission was complete. It was time to go home. "You boy." The voice was deep and resonant, even without the booming hero persona. Izuku stopped and turned. All Might, in his towering, muscular form, was walking towards him. The other heroes were flanking him, their expressions a mixture of stern disapproval and confusion. That was an incredibly reckless and dangerous act. Death Arms began, pointing a thick finger at Izuku. "You're a civilian. You could have been killed. You should have let the professionals handle it." Izuku met his gaze without flinching. His green eyes were like chips of ice. "You were not handling it," he stated, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. It was not an accusation, it was a simple observation of fact. "You were waiting. The hostage was suffocating. Your hesitation would have cost him his life." The heroes were taken aback by his blunt, cold assessment. Before they could retort, All Might held up a hand, silencing them. He looked down at Izuku, his signature smile gone, replaced by an expression of intense scrutiny. He had seen it. In the chaos, while everyone else was focused on the monster, he had seen the impossibly fast, impossibly precise projectiles. He had seen the villain flinch a split second before he arrived. "They are right, it was dangerous," All Might said, his voice softer now. "But it was also brilliant. Your aim, your timing, your tactical assessment. I have seen veteran heroes with less composure. What is your name, young man? Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya, All Might repeated, the name rolling in his mind. What you did was unsanctioned. Illegal, even. But tell me why you did it. Why did you act when no one else would? Izuku's gaze was unwavering. He looked from the chastising heroes to the towering symbol of peace, the world's ultimate sledgehammer. And he gave the only answer his life, his training, and his family's philosophy could have produced. Because the situation required a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, he said calmly. You were all waiting for a bigger hammer to arrive. I was the only one who saw where to cut. The silence that followed was profound. The other heroes stared, speechless. They had expected a tearful, scared teenager, or a glory-seeking wannabe. They were met with a young man who spoke with the chilling confidence of a seasoned professional. All Might's blue eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The boy's words struck him with the force of a physical blow. A scalpel, not a sledgehammer. For years, he had been the world's hammer, smashing every problem he encountered. But now, with his injury, his time limit, he knew the world couldn't rely on a hammer forever. He had been searching for a successor, someone with a heroic heart and the strength to carry his burden. He had been looking for another All Might. But as he looked at this calm, confident boy, this child who had faced a terrifying villain with nothing more than pocket debris and flawless technique, a new, radical thought entered his mind. Maybe he hadn't been looking for the right thing. Maybe the next symbol of peace didn't need to be another sledgehammer. Maybe, just maybe, what the world truly needed was a scalpel. Midoriya, All Might said, his voice filled with a strange new gravity. Stay right here. There is something we need to discuss. Izuku watched him, his mind already analyzing the hero's tone, his posture, the shift in his expression. This was unexpected. A new variable. And Izuku Midoriya was always prepared for new variables. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod and waited, a point of stillness in the swirling chaos of the aftermath. The aftermath of a villain attack was a symphony of organized chaos. The sharp orders of police officers, the crackle of radios, the whine of approaching ambulance sirens, and the ceaseless, hungry clicking of news cameras. Izuku stood apart from it all, a small island of calm in a turbulent sea. He had been asked to wait by All Might, and so he waited. The Yamikage were masters of patience. The other heroes, Death Arms, Kamiri Woods, and the others, had tried to question him further, their professional pride clearly stung by his cold, accurate assessment of their performance. But one look from All Might had silenced them. The symbol of peace had a presence that demanded obedience even from his colleagues. He was currently giving a clipped, sanitized version of events to the press, his famous smile firmly in place, though Izuku could detect the strain beneath it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of observation, All Might extricated himself from the reporters. He walked towards Izuku, the crowd parting before him like the Red Sea. Walk with me, young Midoriya, he said, his voice a low rumble meant only for Izuku. He placed a hand the size of a dinner plate on Izuku's shoulder, not to restrain him, but to guide him, steering him away from the prying eyes and into a quiet side alley. The sounds of the street faded, replaced by the drip of a leaky pipe and the distant hum of the city. The alley was grimy and narrow, a world away from the bright lights and adoring crowds. All Might led him to a rusted service ladder and gestured upwards. After you? Izuku didn't question it. He ascended the ladder with the practiced, silent efficiency of someone who had spent years training in urban environments. He reached the rooftop, a flat expanse of gravel and ventilation units, and turned to help the hero up. But All Might was already there, having seemingly cleared the 5-story building in a single, effortless leap. The view was breathtaking. The sun was beginning to set, painting the city skyline in hues of orange and violet. Below, the flashing lights of the emergency vehicles looked like scattered jewels. I wanted to speak to you somewhere private, All Might began, his back to Izuku as he gazed out over the city he protected. What you did today, you have any idea how many quirk regulations you violated? 17, if you include municipal bylaws on projectile launching, Izuku replied instantly, his tone matter-of-fact. However, Article 39 of the Heroic Conduct Mandate allows for civilian intervention in a Class B or higher threat if there is imminent and unavoidable loss of life and a clear failure of on-site professional assets. Given the hostage's visible asphyxiation and the hero's inability to engage the target, my actions were legally defensible, if subject to review. All Might turned, a look of utter astonishment on his face. He had expected to intimidate the boy, or at least impress upon him the gravity of the situation. Instead, he'd received a legal analysis. "You've done your homework," he said, the surprise evident in his voice. "A warrior who does not understand the battlefield's rules is the first to fall," Izuku quoted, a piece of Yamakage wisdom his mother was fond of. "Ignorance is a fatal flaw." All Might let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a bark. "A warrior, huh? You really don't see the world like other kids your age." He sighed, the sound heavy and weary, and the air around him seemed to shimmer. "There is a reason I brought you up here. A reason I saw something in you down there. To explain, I have to show you something. I ask that you do not scream." Before Izuku could process the strange request, a thick cloud of steam erupted from All Might's body. It wasn't smoke, but condensation, as if a massive amount of heat and pressure were being released at once. The iconic, muscular form began to shrink, to deflate like a punctured balloon. The towering hero, the pillar of society, withered away. When the steam cleared, a completely different man stood in his place. He was horrifyingly gaunt, a living skeleton with sunken eyes, sharp, angular cheekbones, and blonde hair that drooped like wilted flowers. He looked less like a man and more like a ghost. A ragged t-shirt, now several sizes too large, hung from his frail frame. He coughed, and a trickle of blood dribbled from the corner of his mouth, which he wiped away with a practiced air of annoyance. Izuku's mind, for the first time in a long while, went completely blank for a fraction of a second. Then, his training took over. He didn't scream. He didn't gasp. He analyzed. Subject transformation? Not a quirk-based illusion. The displacement of mass was accompanied by a thermodynamic release. This is a biological state change. The subject's true form? A secondary quirk? No, the blood, the emaciated frame. This is the result of a catastrophic injury. "This is my true form," the skeletal man said, his voice now thin and reedy, though the cadence was unmistakably All Might's. "The symbol of peace, you know, is like a guy flexing at the pool. I can only maintain that form for about 3 hours a day now. And it's getting shorter." He lifted his shirt, revealing a horrific injury that made Izuku's breath catch in his throat. A massive, swirling scar covered the left side of his torso, a puckered, starburst crater of ruined flesh that spoke of a wound that should have been instantly fatal. "Got this in a fight 5 years ago," he explained, his tone grim. "You probably never heard about it. I made sure it was kept out of the press. I took a villain's attack that destroyed my stomach and one of my lungs. I've been wasting away ever since." He let the shirt fall. "The symbol of peace, who saves everyone with a smile, is running on borrowed time." Izuku processed this new, world-altering information. All Might, the invincible icon, was critically wounded and fading. This explained the recent decrease in his public appearances, the shorter times he spent at incident sites. The entire foundation of modern heroic society was built on a pillar that was crumbling from the inside. "Why are you showing me this?" Izuku asked, his voice steady despite the shocking revelation. It was the only logical question. Such a secret was a weapon that could destabilize the entire country. To share it with a stranger, a teenager, there had to be a reason. "Because of what you said," the hero, who Izuku now knew was named Toshinori Yagi from his research, replied. "About the scalpel and the sledgehammer. For years I have been this world's sledgehammer, and it worked. But I'm broken now. And the world still needs protecting. I need someone to carry on my legacy. I need a successor." Toshinori's sunken eyes seemed to glow with a strange intensity. "My quirk is not what you think it is, young man. It's not just super strength. It is a sacred torch, passed from one generation to the next. It is called One for All," he began to explain. "A story of a quirk born in the dark dawn of the superhuman age, a power that could be transferred from person to person. A power that stockpiled the strength of all its previous users. He spoke of a great evil, a shadowy puppet master named All for One who could steal and grant quirks, the very antithesis of his own power. He spoke of a generational battle, a secret war fought in the shadows to keep the world safe. Izuku listened, his analytical mind piecing together the narrative. It sounded like something out of a pre-quirk comic book, but the man before him was proof of its reality. The world was far more complex and dangerous than the nightly news portrayed. This wasn't just about stopping bank robbers and rampaging villains. This was about a war. One for all is the crystallized power of many, a force for good that has stood against the darkness for nearly a century, Toshinori finished, his voice resonating with a power his frail body should not have possessed. I am the eighth wielder. And for a long time, I have been searching for the ninth. I have been looking for someone with a true heroic spirit, someone who runs into danger not for fame or glory, but because their body moves before they can think. Today I saw that spirit in you. He took a step closer. But I saw something more. I saw a mind that is as sharp as any blade. I saw discipline, control, and a conviction that I have not seen in anyone, hero or civilian. The power of one for all is immense, volatile. In the hands of someone without control, it would destroy their body. But in your hands, under your command, a power meant to be a sledgehammer could become the most precise, most unstoppable tool for justice the world has ever known. The offer hung in the air, heavy and immense. The chance to inherit the power of the number one hero. The power to save millions. For the boy from the stories, the quirkless, crying child that Izuku could have been, this would have been a dream made manifest. But Izuku Midoriya was not that boy. He was the heir to the Yamikage. And his first reaction was not elation, but skepticism. He looked at Toshinori, then back out at the sprawling city. Your power is incredible, he began, choosing his words with care. The world owes you a debt it can never repay. I respect that. I respect you. But I have to question your methods, and by extension, the nature of this power you offer. Toshinori blinked, taken aback. Question my methods? Yes, Izuku said, turning to face him fully. Your Texas smash today. It was effective, certainly. It neutralized the villain and saved the hostage. But it also generated a shockwave that altered the air pressure over 3 city wards. It shattered windows for 6 blocks, and likely caused millions in municipal and private property damage due to microfractures in building foundations. It was, with all due respect, overkill. He gestured to the city. Your entire career has been defined by such acts. You punch a problem until it stops moving. It's a valid strategy, but it is inefficient and crude. You are the world's sledgehammer. But what happens when you encounter a problem that is too delicate for a hammer? A hostage situation where the bomb is tied to the hostage's heartbeat? A villain whose power grows stronger with every direct impact? Power, especially overwhelming power, can become a crutch. It makes one neglect strategy, precision, and the path of least resistance. Toshinori was speechless. No one had ever dared to critique him like this. Not his sidekicks, not the government, not even his old master. They saw the results, the saved lives, and ignored the cost. My family, Izuku continued, his voice taking on a harder edge, has spent generations perfecting the art of achieving maximum effect with minimum force. We learned to solve a war with a single, well-placed piece of intelligence. To stop an army by eliminating its general with one silent arrow in the night. We turn our weak quirks into instruments of impossible precision because we never had the luxury of overwhelming power. We survived because we were smarter, faster, and more efficient than our enemies. He looked Toshinori directly in the eyes. You are offering me the ultimate luxury. A power so great it can smash any obstacle. To accept that, to rely on it, it feels like a betrayal of every lesson I have ever been taught. It feels like an admission that my family's legacy, our entire philosophy, is obsolete. His words were not spoken with arrogance, but with a deep, unshakable conviction. This was the core of his being. He was a Yamikage. He believed in the point of a needle, not the flat of a hammer. So you are refusing? Toshinori asked, a note of disbelief in his voice. I am asking a question, Izuku countered. Is this overwhelming power truly the answer? Or is it just a bigger hammer for a world that has forgotten how to use scalpels? The gaunt hero was silent for a long time, studying the boy before him. He saw the unwavering posture, the analytical mind working behind those intense green eyes. He had expected gratitude, maybe some tears. He had received a philosophical debate and a tactical critique. And in that moment, his certainty that this was the right boy solidified into something absolute. This boy wasn't hungry for power. He questioned it. He respected his own strength, his own heritage. He had a spine made of tempered steel. He wouldn't be a vessel for one for all. He would be its master. That, Toshinori said, a genuine, skeletal smile spreading across his face for the first time, is an excellent question. And it's one a true hero should always be asking. Izuku's posture relaxed slightly. He had been understood. So what now? The hero asked. You reject my offer, and we go our separate ways? No, Izuku said, an idea forming in his mind. A way to honor both his legacy and this unexpected, staggering opportunity. A test. I would like to make a counteroffer. Toshinori raised a thin eyebrow. I'm listening. I have trained my entire life to enter UA High. It is my goal to become a hero who embodies my family's principles. A hero who proves that precision and intellect are as valuable, if not more so, than raw power. Izuku's voice was firm, filled with the purpose that had driven him for a decade. Let me try. Let me enter UA, with my own strength, with my own quirk. Let me face the challenges ahead and see for myself where the limits of my philosophy lie. He took a breath, his gaze unflinching. If I am successful, then I will have proven my point. If I fail, if I encounter a wall that my skills cannot breach, a threat that precision alone cannot overcome, then I will know. I will know that you were right, and that some problems do require a sledgehammer. And on that day, I will come to you, and I will accept your power. Not as a gift, but as a necessary tool to be mastered. I will not abandon the skills my family gave me. I will simply add a new, more powerful weapon to my arsenal. It was an audacious proposal. A conditional acceptance of the greatest power on earth. He was telling the symbol of peace, thank you, but I'd like to try my way first. Toshinori stared at him, then threw his head back and let out a genuine, wheezing laugh. It devolved into a coughing fit, but the mirth in his eyes was undeniable. You, Izuku Midoriya, he gasped, wiping a tear from his eye, are either the bravest or most insane child I have ever met. Possibly both. He sobered, his expression becoming one of deep respect. Your conviction is humbling. You don't want power handed to you. You want to earn your place. You want to test your own worth first. That is more than I could ever ask for in a successor. He extended a bony hand. Very well, young Midoriya. I accept your terms. Enter Yui, show me what the Yamakage way can do. I will be watching. And I will hold one for all for you. But be warned, his voice dropped to a serious whisper, the world is getting more dangerous. The shadows are stirring. I fear the day you face that wall may come sooner than you think. Izuku took the offered hand. The grip was surprisingly strong, a remnant of the power that lay dormant within. I understand, he said. When that day comes, I will be ready. They stood there for another moment on the rooftop as twilight bled into night, the city lights beginning to sparkle below. A silent agreement had been forged. It was not the passing of a torch, not yet. It was the beginning of an observation. A test. As Izuku walked home later that evening, the weight of the conversation settled upon him. He was not the boy who had left for school that morning. He had seen behind the curtain of society, glimpsed the frail, dying man who held the world on his shoulders, and been offered a power beyond comprehension. He wasn't excited. He wasn't scared. He felt burdened. A new, complex variable had been introduced into his life's equation. His mission was no longer simply to become a hero. Now, he had to prove that his entire existence, his family's centuries of tradition, was still relevant in a world of titans. He had to walk the path of the needle, knowing that the sledgehammer was waiting for him if he failed. He opened the door to his home, the familiar smells of tea and clean wood greeting him. Izuku, is that you? His mother's voice called from the kitchen. You're late. Is everything all right? He paused in the entryway, the hidden dojo beneath his feet a silent reminder of who he was. "Everything is fine, Mom," he called back, his voice calm and even. "I just took the scenic route." He had a mission to prepare for. The UA entrance exam was no longer just a test. It was the first battle in a war for the soul of heroism. And Izuku Midoriya intended to win it with the point of a needle. The morning of the UA entrance exam dawned crisp and clear. For thousands of teenagers across Japan, it was a day of frantic nerves, last-minute power showcases in front of the bathroom mirror, and the anxious consumption of high-energy breakfasts. In the Midoriya household, it was a day of quiet ritual. Izuku sat Seiza-style on a meditation cushion in the center of the dojo, the rising sun casting long, clean shadows across the tatami mats. His eyes were closed, his breathing a slow, deep cadence that seemed to be in perfect sync with the rhythm of the house. He was not praying for luck, or visualizing success. He was sharpening his mind, honing his focus to a razor's edge. Laid out before him on a black silk cloth was his gear for the day. It was sparse, minimalist, and lethal. There were 24 small, weighted throwing knives, their matte black finish absorbing the light. They were custom forged by his father, perfectly balanced, with monomolecular edges capable of shearing through steel cables. Beside them were 3 leather pouches filled with ball bearings of polished, hardened chrome steel. They were silent, the pouches lined with a sound-dampening fabric. To anyone else, it was an odd, almost archaic collection of tools. To Izuku, it was an arsenal. He ran a thumb over the cool, smooth surface of a bearing, feeling its perfect, dense weight. In his hands, it was a simple sphere of metal. Guided by his quirk, it was a non-lethal round capable of shattering a cinder block, or disabling a limb with surgical precision. The door to the dojo slid open. Hisashi stood there, already dressed in his work clothes, a simple suit that did little to hide the disciplined posture of a lifelong martial artist. He held out a thermos. "High-protein nutrient solution," he said. "Keeps the mind sharp and the body energized without the sluggishness of a heavy meal. Remember the objective, Izuku. You are not there to impress, you are there to excel. They will expect overwhelming force. Give them finesse. Find the seams in their armor. Every system has a weakness. Your job is to find it and exploit it." "I will, Father," Izuku replied, taking the thermos and bowing his head in respect. Inko appeared behind her husband, her expression a mixture of maternal pride and underlying anxiety. She straightened the collar of Izuku's tracksuit, a nervous habit she never quite managed to break. "Be careful," she whispered, her hand lingering on his shoulder. "They won't understand what you can do. They'll see your quirk on paper and underestimate you. Use that. And show them. Show them what a Yamakage can do." "I will," he repeated, his voice calm and reassuring. He gave her a rare small smile. "It's just a test." The campus of UA High was less a school and more a fortress of educational ambition. Its gleaming glass towers and massive, imposing gates were designed to inspire awe and a sense of legacy. As Izuku walked with the throngs of other applicants, he saw their faces. They were a mixture of excitement, terror, and desperate hope. They looked at the school like a holy temple. Izuku looked at it like a mission objective. He scanned the walls, noting camera placements, security checkpoints, and potential infiltration routes. A habit, ingrained and automatic. His eyes swept over the crowd, categorizing quirks based on visible mutations or pre-exam displays of power. A girl with vine-like hair. A boy with engine calves. A chorus of raw, untamed potential. A field of sledgehammers. He felt a slight unevenness in the paving stone beneath his foot, and adjusted his stride to step cleanly over it, his balance perfect. A moment later, a brown-haired girl with a round, cheerful face tripped on that same stone, letting out a small yelp. Before she could fall, Izuku's hand shot out, not touching her, but his quirk gently pushing on the heavy buckle of her backpack, stabilizing her. She righted herself, blinking in surprise. "Whoa! Thanks," she said, turning to him with a bright, beaming smile. "That was close. So clumsy of me." "I'm Ochako Uraraka, Izuku Midoriya," he replied with a slight nod. His intervention had been instinctual, a simple correction of an unstable trajectory. "Watch your step. The stones here are uneven." Right. Well, good luck in there, she said, her cheeks slightly pink, before hurrying on. She was an open book, her emotions clear and honest. A variable, but not a threat. He continued towards the auditorium doors and then he felt it, a familiar, explosive presence. A wave of heat and the scent of burnt sugar and nitroglycerin. DKU. The voice was a low growl. Izuku stopped and turned without haste. Katsuki Bakugo stood there, his red eyes narrowed into furious slits, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He looked Izuku up and down, his lip curling in a sneer of utter disbelief. What the hell are you doing here? Bakugo snarled, his voice low enough that only Izuku could hear. This isn't a game for quirkless, useless wannabes. Did you come to cheer me on? For years that tone, that word, Deku, would have made Izuku flinch, would have caused him to shrink into himself. Now, he simply met Bakugo's glare with an unnervingly calm gaze. The same thing as you, Bakugo, he said, his voice even and level. The lack of his old nickname, Kaken, was a deliberate choice. It was the severing of a tie Bakugo himself had burned long ago. I'm here to take the exam. Bakugo's sneer faltered, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. This wasn't the stuttering, terrified Deku he knew. This was someone else. Someone cold. The lack of fear was more infuriating than any retort. You take the exam? Bakugo scoffed, trying to regain his footing. With what? Your mom's power to pull paper clips. You'll be a smear on the pavement before the test even starts. That is a possible outcome, Izuku acknowledged calmly. Though my statistical analysis suggests a low probability. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to find a seat. It is inefficient to stand in a crowded hallway. He turned and walked away, leaving Bakugo standing there, speechless and simmering with a new, unfamiliar rage. It wasn't the rage of superiority. It was the rage of confusion. The world, as he knew it, had just tilted on its axis. The pebble he had always kicked around had just refused to move. The auditorium was vast, filled with the nervous energy of hundreds of applicants. On stage, the pro-hero present mic was a whirlwind of leather, hair gel, and sonic energy. Hello everybody and welcome to the show. Can I get a yeah? Silence. Izuku tuned out the hero's bombastic delivery, his eyes locked on the projection screen. He absorbed the critical data. The test would be a 10-minute mock urban battle. The targets were robots, designated as villains, with 3 types corresponding to different point values, 1, 2, and 3 points. These guys are just obstacles. Present Mike screeched. Your goal is to use your awesome quirks to rack up as many points as you can. Izuku's mind was already at work. 3 target types. Likely tiered armor and offensive capabilities. 1-pointers will be numerous but weak, a distraction. 3-pointers will be the most valuable but also the most dangerous, and likely heavily armored. The optimal strategy is not to engage every target, but to prioritize high-value targets while minimizing energy expenditure. He was muttering under his breath, a quiet stream of tactical analysis, a habit he never quite managed to break from his endless hours of study. And you, with the messy green hair, Izuku looked up. A tall, broad-shouldered young man with glasses was standing, pointing a rigid hand in his direction. You have been muttering this entire time. It is distracting and unbecoming of a potential UE student. If you are not going to take this seriously, then you should leave. Before Izuku could respond, Present Mike cut in. All right, examinee 7111, thanks for the passion, but take your seat. Let me get to the main event. The screen changed, showing the silhouette of a colossal robot that dwarfed the others. The 4th villain type is worth 0 points. He's a gimmick. An arena trap. Think of him like a thwomp from Super Mario. I recommend you listeners just run away. The boy with the glasses sat down, looking mortified. Izuku gave him a brief glance. High-strung, follows rules to the letter. Predictable. He turned his attention back to the screen. 0-pointer, an environmental hazard. Its purpose is to induce panic, scatter applicants, and test crisis response. It is not a target. It is a tool. To be avoided or to be used. The briefing concluded, and they were herded towards buses that would take them to their designated battle centers. Izuku found himself at the gates of Battle Center B. The other applicants were a tense collection of nerves and bravado. The boy with the engined calves was stretching. Uraraka was taking deep, calming breaths. They were all focused on the fight to come. Izuku was perfectly still. He did a final, silent check of his gear. The knives were secure. The ball bearings were ready. His breathing was slow and even. He scanned the cityscape beyond the towering gates, his eyes tracing paths along rooftops, through narrow alleys, and over underpasses. He wasn't just looking at a city. He was mapping a battlefield. AN. Start. Present mixed voice boomed from unseen speakers. No one moved. They looked around, confused. What's the matter? There's no countdown in a real fight. Go, go, go! While everyone else was still processing, Izuku was already gone. He burst from the crowd, a silent, green and black blur. He didn't run down the main street where the first, easiest targets would surely spawn and create a chaotic bottleneck. That was the path for sledgehammers. He veered left, into a narrow alley. His feet barely seemed to touch the ground as he used the walls to kick off, gaining momentum. In seconds, he was scaling a fire escape, his movements fluid and silent, honed by years of Yamakuchi training. He reached the rooftop just as the first screams and explosions echoed from the street below. From his vantage point, the battlefield was laid out before him. He saw a cluster of students mobbing a single one-pointer, a clumsy brawl of flashy, inefficient attacks. A waste of energy. He spotted his first target. A lone two-pointer, patrolling a street 2 blocks away. It was a bipedal machine with heavy armor plating and Gatling guns for arms. A direct assault would be foolish. Izuku crouched at the edge of the roof. He reached into a pouch, his fingers closing around a single, cold steel ball bearing. He extended his senses, his quirk wrapping around the small sphere like an invisible gauntlet. He calculated the trajectory, the wind speed, the target's movement pattern. He flicked his wrist. The ball bearing didn't just fly, it was launched. It broke the sound barrier with a nearly inaudible crack, a silver streak against the blue sky. It struck the two-pointer not on its heavy chest plate, but at the exposed rotator joint of its right shoulder. TNK crunch! The hardened steel, moving at hypersonic speed, shattered the joint mechanism. The robot's arm went limp, its Gatling guns scraping against the pavement. The machine's targeting system whirred, trying to locate the source of the attack, but Izuku was already moving. Another flick of the wrist. Another silver streak. This one struck the robot's ankle joint. The leg seized, and the two-pointer tipped forward, crashing to the ground with a groan of protesting metal. 2 shots. 2 points. Minimal effort. Maximum efficiency. This was his rhythm. He became a ghost flitting across the rooftops. He never engaged directly. He was a phantom sniper, his ammunition the mundane contents of his pouches. A one-pointer turned a corner. A ball bearing to its optical sensor, and it was left blind and flailing. 1 point. A group of 3 one-pointers rolled down a main avenue. Izuku didn't waste his bearings. He reached for a knife. His quirk guided it in a perfect, silent arc. It didn't slam into the armor. It slipped into the thin seam between the head and torso, severing a critical power conduit. The lead robot sparked and died, causing the other 2 to crash into it. 3 points. He moved with a lethal grace that was utterly at odds with the chaotic battlefield. While others were screaming battle cries and leveling buildings, Izuku was a whisper. The only sound he made was the soft sip of his projectiles and the quiet thud as they found their marks. 27 points. Time remaining 6 minutes. His internal clock was precise. He leaped from one building to the next, a 5-meter gap that he cleared with ease. He landed in a silent roll, coming up in a crouch. Below him, he saw the boy with the engine calves, Tenya Ida, taking down a 3-pointer with a powerful kick. It was impressive, but costly. The boy was breathing heavily, his engine steaming. Brute force was a finite resource. Izuku spotted his own 3-pointer. It was a tank-like machine with thick plating and a cannon. It was cornering another applicant. Izuku didn't hesitate. 3 ball bearings launched in rapid succession. They weren't aimed at the armor. The first struck the turret's elevation gear, jamming it. The second hit the treads, snapping a link. The third slammed into the cannon's muzzle just as it was about to fire. The resulting backfire caused a contained explosion, frying the robot's internal circuitry. 3 points. The other applicant scrambled away, not even realizing he'd been saved. 45 points. Acceptable progress. He was about to move on when the world began to shake. A low, grinding rumble vibrated up through the soles of his shoes. A shadow fell over his section of the city, so vast and sudden it was like a solar eclipse. The panic screams from the streets below reached a new, terrified crescendo. Izuka looked up. And up. And up. The 0-point robot was a titan, a monster of metal and engineering that towered over the tallest buildings in the mock city. Its every step was an earthquake, shattering asphalt and buckling foundations. It was designed to be an insurmountable obstacle, a force of nature that could not be fought. Its purpose was immediately clear. The other applicants, who had been fighting with such bravado moments before, turned and fled. It was a tide of sheer, unadulterated panic. The robot was doing its job perfectly. Izuku's assessment was instantaneous. Not a target. An obstacle. No value in engagement. Optimal path is tactical withdrawal and acquisition of remaining point-based targets. He turned to leave, his mind already plotting a new route through the chaos. But then he heard a small, pained cry from the street below. His eyes snapped down. It was her. Uraraka. The cheerful girl from the gate. Her leg was pinned beneath a massive slab of concrete, a piece of collateral damage from the 0-pointer's rampage. She was trying desperately to push it off, but it was too heavy. And the giant robot, in its slow, inexorable advance, was walking directly towards her. In that moment, the exam, the points, the mission, it all became secondary. Objective update: rescue trapped applicant. His mind raced, discarding and formulating plans at a speed that would have given a supercomputer pause. His ball bearings would be like gnats against that armor. His knives would barely scratch the paint. He had no sledgehammer. He couldn't punch it into submission. He couldn't destroy it, but he didn't have to. A system this large, this complex, would be riddled with weaknesses. He just had to find one. His eyes scanned the behemoth, not as a monster, but as a machine. He saw the thick plating, the powerful torso, the heavily armored head. But then he looked lower. All that weight, thousands of tons of it, was supported by 2 legs. And those legs were animated by a series of massive hydraulic pistons and servomotors at the knee and ankle joints. They were covered, but there were seams. Gaps. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. He had a plan. It was reckless. The probability of failure was high. But it was the only option. He leaped from the rooftop, landing silently in the debris-strewn street. He didn't run at the robot. He ran parallel to it, using the chaos and the dust clouds as cover. He moved with a speed that was almost supernatural, his quirk giving him tiny, precise pushes off chunks of rubble, accelerating him. He reached the robot's massive foot just as it was lifting for another step. This was his chance. He leaped, grabbing onto a protruding piece of armor. He began to climb. It was like scaling a sheer cliff face during an earthquake. The entire structure shuddered and groaned with every movement. He ignored the terrifying height, the grinding of the gears. He was focused. He pulled himself up, hand over hand, until he reached the target, the ankle joint. It was a complex web of machinery, the size of a small car. And just as he predicted, there were gaps in the armor plating where the massive pistons were housed. He could see the thick, bundled power cables and hydraulic lines, the lifeblood of the machine. He braced himself, hooking his legs around a support strut. He reached into his pouch and drew 2 of his Yamakage knives. He held them in a reverse grip. He didn't throw them. He needed more force. He closed his eyes for a second, focusing his quirk. He wasn't just controlling the knives anymore. He was channeling his will into them. He drove them forward, not with his arms, but with a concentrated blast of telekinetic force. SHHNK. SHHNK. The knives, guided with pinpoint accuracy and propelled by an invisible, powerful hand, slammed into the narrow gaps. They punched through the thinner casing inside, burying themselves to the hilt in the bundled cables. Sparks erupted in a blinding shower. Black, high-pressure fluid sprayed out like arterial blood. The robot let out a deafening, metallic shriek as 1,000 error messages flooded its system. The leg seized. The ankle joint locked in place, with its forward momentum carrying it, but its leg unable to complete the step. The laws of physics took over. The zero-pointer stumbled. Its balance, for a critical second, was gone. It tipped, a slow, majestic, terrifying fall. It crashed to the ground with a sound like the end of the world, its massive head landing exactly where Uraraka had been trapped, but its body falling away from her. Izuku had already leaped clear, using his quirk to slow his descent. He landed in a crouch beside the trapped girl just as the final, deafening buzzer of the exam sounded. The world went silent, save for the crackle of fires and the groaning of stressed metal. The exam was over. Izuku ignored the ringing in his ears. He shoved the 2 knives he still held back into their sheaths and gripped the edge of the concrete slab pinning Uraraka. With a sharp ki, he put all his Yamakage-trained strength into his legs and back, lifting it just enough for her to pull her leg free. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice completely level, though his heart was hammering against his ribs. Uraraka stared at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of pain, shock, and utter awe. She looked from him to the fallen titan that blotted out the sky, and then back to him. You did that?" she breathed. "It was structurally unsound," he replied simply, as if discussing a poorly built piece of furniture. He glanced at her ankle. "It's swelling. You need medical attention." In a hidden observation room, a group of pro-heroes and UA staff sat in stunned silence. They had just watched a boy with a seemingly minor quirk single-handedly neutralize an obstacle that had terrified hundreds of other applicants. "My word." A small, mouse-like creature in a suit murmured, his black eyes gleaming with intelligence. He didn't try to fight it. He diagnosed it. He found its pressure point and brought it down. A tired-looking man in a black costume, Shota Aizawa, leaned forward, a rare flicker of interest in his eyes. 0 villain points, he said in his signature monotone. He ignored the obvious targets and played his own game. Not entirely, All Might said, watching a different screen that tallied the final scores. "Look again." The numbers on the main screen began to update. Izuku Midoriya, villain points 45. A respectable score, enough to pass. But then, another counter began to tick upwards fast. Rescue points, 10, 20, 30, 45, 60. The final tally appeared. Izuku Midoriya, villain points 45. Rescue points 60. Total 105. He had not only passed. He had shattered the record. He had taken first place. Back in the battle center, Izuku stood up, his analysis of his own performance complete. He had proven his point. He had faced a problem designed for a sledgehammer, and dismantled it with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. He didn't need overwhelming power. He just needed to know where to cut. The first day at UA High did not begin with a grand welcome ceremony, or an inspiring speech from the principal. It began with the search for a classroom. The hallways of the main building were a labyrinth of gleaming corridors and impossibly large doors, each one a monument to the scale of the ambitions housed within. Izuku navigated the space with the calm purpose of a cartographer exploring a new continent. He observed everything: the placement of security cameras, the subtle reinforcement in the walls, the faint scent of industrial-grade floor cleaner. He found the door to Class 1A, a behemoth of steel painted a bold red, and slid it open. The classroom was already buzzing with the chaotic energy of 19 exceptional teenagers. His eyes did a quick, sweeping scan, cataloging the occupants. He recognized the earnest, bespectacled boy from the exam briefing, who was already attempting to enforce a level of decorum by demanding another student take his feet off a desk. The student in question was, of course, Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku's gaze lingered on Bakugo for a fraction of a second. He was a storm cloud condensed into human form, radiating an aura of volatile impatience. His posture was a study in aggressive nonchalance, a known variable. Predictable. Izuku's analysis moved on. He saw the cheerful, brown-haired girl from the entrance, Ochako Uraraka, talking with a girl with pink skin and small horns. He saw a boy with red, spiky hair attempting to make friends with Bakugo, and being utterly ignored. It was a room of disparate, powerful parts, not yet a cohesive unit. He chose a seat near the back by the window, a strategically advantageous position offering a clear view of the entire room and an escape route, should one ever be necessary. It was a habit he couldn't break. Always know your exits. Ah, you're the plain-looking one. Izuku looked up. The girl with the bob-cut, Uraraka, was beaming at him. And you got in? That's awesome. What you did with that giant robot was insane. I mean, you just climbed up and... It is you! A rigid voice cut in. The boy with glasses, Tenya Ida, marched over to their desks, his arms chopping the air with mechanical precision. I must formally apologize for my behavior at the briefing. You correctly deduced the true nature of the exam structure while I failed to see it. I was mistaken about you. He bowed a perfect, 90-degree angle. My name is Tenya Ida, from Semi-Private Academy. I'm Ochako Uraraka. She added cheerfully. Izuku Midoriya, he replied, giving them both a polite, measured nod. Your apology is unnecessary, Ida. You were operating on the information you were given. And Uraraka, it's good to see your leg has healed. Uraraka blinked, touching her ankle. Oh. Yeah, recovery girl fixed me right up. But how did you? If you're here to make friends, you can pack up and leave. The voice was a low, dry drawl that cut through the classroom chatter like a whetstone on steel. It came from the floor. A yellow sleeping bag, resembling a monstrous, mummified caterpillar, lay on the floor behind the teacher's podium. It slowly rose, and a man with tired, bloodshot eyes, a mess of black hair, and a face covered in stubble emerged. He took a long slurp from a juice pouch. It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down, the man said, his voice dripping with lethargy. That's not going to work. Time is a precious resource. My name is Shota Aizawa. I'm your homeroom teacher. The class stared, a collective wave of disbelief washing over them. This walking embodiment of exhaustion was a pro hero and their teacher? Aizawa reached into his sleeping bag and pulled out a blue UA gym uniform. Put these on and meet me on the P grounds. Now, the P grounds were vast and sun-drenched. The air was filled with the nervous energy of the students, now clad in their identical blue uniforms. Aizawa stood before them, his expression as unreadable as ever. Today, he began, his voice flat, we're going to be holding a quirk assessment test. A wave of murmurs went through the class. A quirk test? Uraraka whispered. But what about the entrance ceremony? Or orientation? There's no time to waste on pointless pleasantries, Aizawa continued, his gaze sweeping over them. UA is not a traditional school. You're here to become heroes, and that means pushing your limits from day one. You've all been taking standardized physical exams since middle school. Long jump, grip strength, the 50-meter dash. But you were never allowed to use your quirks. That is irrational. The ministry that standardizes those tests is run by fossils. He turned to Bakugo. Bakugo. You finished first in the practical exam for the entrance test. What was your best throw for the softball in middle school? Bakugo's trademark sneer was firmly in place. 67 meters. Try it with your quirk, Aizawa said, tossing him a softball. Bakugo strode into the chalk circle, a feral grin spreading across his face. He stretched his arms, a predator loosening its muscles before a kill. All right then, he grunted. He wound up, his palm crackling with contained energy. As he threw, he unleashed a massive explosion from his hand, a concussive blast that propelled the ball like a cannon shot. Daithai! He screamed, the word echoing across the field. Izuku watched the ball's trajectory. It was powerful, certainly, but also unstable. The blast had sent it tumbling end over end, creating drag. A more controlled, focused propulsion would have sent it further. It was raw power, unrefined. Aizawa held up a small device. It beeped, displaying the result. 705.2 meters. The class erupted in gasps and excited chatter. Whoa! 705 meters. This looks fun. We can really use our quirks. Aizawa's expression soured. The corner of his mouth turned down in a grim line. Fun? he said, the word dripping with venom. You think this is fun? You have 3 years here to become heroes. You think it's all going to be games and fun? His tired eyes suddenly blazed with a fierce, intimidating light, and his scarf began to float ominously around him. So be it. The student who ranks last in these 8 tests will be judged to have 0 potential, and will be expelled immediately. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic swept through the students. Expulsion? On the first day? This had to be a joke, a scare tactic. But the look on Aizawa's face said otherwise. It was the cold, hard logic of a man who had seen too many unprepared heroes die. Izuku felt the tension in the air, the fear radiating from his classmates. But he felt no panic himself. His mind was already working. A test of potential. 8 trials. Expulsion for the lowest score. The teacher is establishing a baseline of our abilities and our capacity to adapt under pressure. The threat is a motivational tool. Logical, if brutal. The goal is not just to perform, but to perform intelligently. To demonstrate potential. This is Yuehai, Aizawa said, his voice a low growl. Welcome to the world of heroes. Test 1, 50-meter dash. The first test was a straightforward measure of speed. The students were paired off. Izuku was lined up against Tenya Ida. He watched as Ida crouched, the engine pipes on his calves hissing with steam. A simple, powerful quirk for linear motion. On your mark. The automated voice from the starting gate was clinical. Izuku fell into a runner's stance. But his focus wasn't just on the track ahead. He extended his senses, his quirk latching onto 2 specific points, the dense, vulcanized rubber of his shoe soles, and the small metal aglets at the tips of his shoelaces. They were small, insignificant, but they were his anchors. Get set, he saw the path. A series of perfectly timed, minute telekinetic shoves. Not a single massive push, which would be crude and throw off his balance. This would be a symphony of small, precise accelerations, working in concert with his own muscles. Bang! Ida shot forward like a bullet, his engines roaring. He was a blur of blue and silver. But Izuku was not slow. As his feet pounded the track, his quirk pulsed. Push. 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 Each time his foot was about to leave the ground, he gave it a tiny, invisible nudge, increasing the force of his push-off, lengthening his stride by a few crucial centimeters. He wasn't flying. He was augmenting. He crossed the finish line. The sensor beeped. 5.58 seconds. It was a good time, but not superhuman. Ida had finished in 3.04 seconds, a testament to his specialized quirk. Not bad, Midoriya, Ida said, his engines venting steam. You have impressive leg strength. Ida hadn't even noticed the quirk usage. It was too subtle. Aizawa, however, had. From the sidelines, the teacher's tired eyes had narrowed slightly. He had seen the slight, unnatural smoothness in Midoriya's stride, the lack of wasted motion. It wasn't just training. It was something else. Test 2, grip strength. This was a test of raw, physical power. Izuku took the dynamometer. He squeezed, channeling the strength honed by years of conditioning, kendo, and climbing. The device beeped. 56.0 kilograms. It was a perfectly respectable, athletic score. But in a class of superhumans, it was distinctly average. He overheard a boy with multiple arms, Mizo Shoji, score an astonishing 540 kilograms. Izuku simply noted his own score on his mental ledger. He was not disappointed. He had never been under the illusion that he possessed brute strength. His strength was of a different kind. This test merely confirmed it. It was another data point. Test 3, standing long jump. This was another opportunity. A simple jump would land him in the middle of the pack. But the objective wasn't to be average. It was to demonstrate potential. He stood at the edge of the sandbox. He crouched low, his muscles coiling. He leaped, a powerful, explosive movement from his legs that sent him soaring forward. But as he reached the apex of his jump, his quirk came alive. He latched onto the metal zipper of his uniform and the eyelets of his shoes. He didn't push. He pulled. He created a sustained telekinetic vector, pulling himself forward, turning his ballistic arc into a controlled, gliding flight. He sailed over the sandbox, landing softly on the grass far beyond it. He had cleared the entire pit. The class stared. That was not a jump. That was something else entirely. Aizawa's gaze remained on him for a full 3 seconds before moving on. The teacher made a small note on his data pad. Test 4, repeated side steps, agility, stamina, rhythm. This was home territory for Izuku. His Yamikage training was built on a foundation of perfect balance and explosive, controlled movement. He began the test, his feet a blur as he moved between the lines. He was already scoring high, his movements economical and precise. Then, he integrated his quirk. As he reached the edge of a line, ready to reverse direction, he would give the sole of his shoe a minute, lateral push. It was just enough to negate his momentum and start his movement in the opposite direction without the slightest bit of muscle strain or hesitation. His rhythm became flawless, inhumanly so. He didn't slow down. He didn't tire. He was a perfect pendulum of motion. His score was near the top of the class. Test 5, the ball throw. This was it. The test that had set the tone for the day. One by one, the students took their turns. Uraraka, with a light touch, made her ball weightless and scored in infinity. It was a clever, lateral thinking application of her quirk. Finally, it was Izuku's turn. He walked into the circle, the whispers following him. It's the guy who got first place in the exam. But his grip strength was so normal. What even is his quirk? He took the softball from Aizawa. It felt solid, familiar in his hand. He could feel the raised stitching, the slight texture of the leather. He took his stance, not like a baseball pitcher, but like an archer, centered, balanced, his body aligned with his target, which was the endless blue sky. He closed his eyes for a moment, shutting out the whispers, the stares, the weight of expectation. He wasn't thinking about the score. He was thinking about the trajectory. The variables. Air density, wind shear at altitude. The planet's rotation, a negligible but still present factor. He opened his eyes. They were clear, focused, the iris a sharp, determined green. He began his throw. It was a beautiful, fluid motion. His body uncoiled like a whip, channeling power from his legs through his core, into his shoulder and arm. It was a perfect, physical throw, honed by a decade of practice with knives, shuriken, and stones. The ball left his hand with a powerful snap. To the onlookers, that was the end of it. The ball shot upwards, a white speck against the blue. But for Izuku, the test had just begun. The moment the ball left his fingertips, his consciousness followed it. His quirk, a leash of invisible force, latched onto it. He felt its mass, its spin, its velocity. He didn't just give it one big push. That was a sledgehammer tactic, Bakugo's tactic. Inefficient. Instead, he applied a constant, steady stream of telekinetic force directly behind the ball's center of mass. He was a rocket engine, pushing it ever higher. He felt the whisper of wind resistance trying to slow it down, and he subtly adjusted the ball's spin, turning it into a perfect, gyroscopically stable projectile. The ball climbed. It passed the 705-meter mark where Bakugo's had started to fall. It kept going. It became a tiny dot, then disappeared from sight completely, still accelerating. He kept the pressure on, pushing it, guiding it, until his senses told him it had left the lower atmosphere. Only then did he release his hold. He lowered his arm, his breathing perfectly calm. The silence on the field was absolute. Everyone, from the students to Aizawa, was staring at the sky where the ball had vanished. Then, they all looked at him. He stood there, his expression placid, as if he had simply tossed a stone into a pond. Aizawa lifted his device. The screen glowed. A single, elegant symbol was displayed, infinity. He had matched Uraraka's score, but through completely different means. Hers was an act of negation, removing a fundamental force. His was an act of application, a sustained, controlled, and overwhelming assertion of force. Aizawa looked from the device to Izuku. A tiny, almost imperceptible smirk touched the corner of his mouth for a fraction of a second before vanishing. Not bad, he grunted. The class erupted. No way! He got infinity too. How? He just threw it. Bakugo was shaking. His fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. His face was a mask of incandescent rage and pure, undiluted confusion. A 705-meter throw had been his crowning achievement, a declaration of his overwhelming power. And this Deku, had just effortlessly surpassed it. It was impossible. It didn't compute. It was like watching a housefly swat a battleship out of the sky. The remaining tests passed in a blur. Izuku performed well in all of them, using his quirk in subtle, efficient ways to augment his already well-trained body. When the final scores were posted, his name was near the top of the list, 4th place. He was just behind a prodigy with a creation quirk, a student with a half-hot half-cold power, and Bakugo, whose raw explosive power had given him an edge in most of the brute force tests. At the bottom of the list was a short boy with purple balls on his head, Minoru Mineta, who was currently weeping openly. By the way, Aizawa said, his voice bored. The expulsion thing was a lie. The class, except for Izuku and a discerning girl with a black ponytail, stared in shock. It was a rational deception, Aizawa explained, a wicked grin finally showing. To draw out the upper limits of your quirks. The girl with the ponytail, Momo Yayorozu, sighed. Of course it was a lie. It should have been obvious. Aizawa gave her an approving nod before his eyes swept back over the class. That's it for today. Your curriculum sheets are in the classroom. Look them over. Midoriya. Izuku's head snapped up. See me for a moment, Aizawa ordered before turning and walking back towards the main building. Izuku followed, aware of the curious and resentful stares of his classmates. He caught up to his teacher near the school entrance. Your quirk is listed as projectile control, Aizawa said, not breaking stride. An advanced form of telekinesis, limited to small objects. That is correct, Sensei, Izuku replied. You're disciplined. Your control is exceptional. You understand subtlety and efficiency. Aizawa stopped and turned, his dark eyes boring into Izuku. You're more like a 10-year veteran than a first-year student. Where did you train? At my family's dojo, Izuku answered honestly. It was the truth, if not the whole truth, Aizawa grunted. Your performance today was impressive. You have a good foundation. But don't get comfortable. Potential is useless if it isn't constantly honed and challenged. You have a scalpel. This school will teach you how to perform surgery on a dragon. Don't fall behind. It was the closest thing to a compliment Aizawa was likely capable of giving. It was also a warning. A challenge. I understand, Sensei, Izuku said with a slight bow. I will not. Aizawa nodded once, then walked away, his scarf trailing behind him like a shadow. The school day concluded with normal academic classes, which Izuku found almost relaxing compared to the morning's test. As the final bell rang, he packed his bag with his usual quiet efficiency. He was one of the first to leave, wanting to get home to begin his after-school training regimen. He was almost at the school gates when the shout came, raw and furious. DKU! Izuku stopped. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. The air itself seemed to crackle with rage. He turned slowly, his expression neutral, to face Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo stormed up to him, grabbing the front of his uniform. The fabric was hot, smelling faintly of nitroglycerin. Bakugo's face was inches from his red eyes wild with a desperation that went beyond mere anger. What the hell was that? Bakugo roared, spittle flying from his mouth. Explain it. Now. That wasn't your quirk. You don't have one. All you can do is make mommy's grocery list float. So what was that? His questions were a torrent of confusion. The infinity ball throw. The long jump. The way Izuku had moved. None of it made sense. The world he had built for himself, a world with him at the apex and Deku at the bottom, had been shattered into a million pieces. That is my quirk, Bakugo, Izuku replied, his voice unnervingly calm. He made no move to break Bakugo's grip. He was not a threat. He was a problem to be solved. Lies! Bakugo screamed, shaking him. You've been hiding it. All this time. You were looking down on me, weren't you? Laughing at me behind my back while you had some crazy strong quirk all along. Is that it? Izuku looked into Bakugo's furious, searching eyes and saw the truth. This wasn't just about the quirk. This was about everything. You think my quirk is the only thing that's changed? Izuku asked, his voice soft but carrying an immense weight. Bakugo faltered, his grip loosening slightly. What are you talking about? Izuku gently but firmly detached Bakugo's hands from his uniform. He smoothed out the fabric, his movements deliberate and calm. Then he looked up, and for the first time, Bakugo saw something in Deku's eyes that wasn't fear or admiration. It was something that looked almost like pity. You've always mistaken power for strength, Katsuki, Izuku said, using his first name for the first time in years. The sound of it was alien, clinical. Power is what you have. It's loud. It's destructive. It's the explosion that gets you 705 meters. But strength is different. Strength is the discipline to train every day for 10 years. Strength is the control to guide a projectile through the upper atmosphere. Strength is understanding that the loudest man in the room is not always the most dangerous. He took a step back, creating a definitive space between them. You have power in spades, Izuku concluded, his green eyes as sharp and cold as polished jade. But you have no real strength. And that is why you can't understand what happened today, and it's why you will continue to fall behind if you don't change. He turned and walked away, not looking back. Bakugo stood frozen, his hands still tingling from the heat of his quirk. Izuku's words echoed in his mind, striking him with more force than any physical blow ever could. Mistaken power for strength. It was an accusation, an analysis, and a prophecy all at once. He was left standing alone, trembling not with rage, but with the terrifying, world-shaking realization that the person he had always defined as weak had just become the measure of a strength he didn't even know existed. Their rivalry had just been redefined. It was no longer the strong versus the weak. It was the sledgehammer versus the scalpel. And for the first time in his life, Katsuki Bakugo was afraid he was holding the wrong tool. The day after the quirk assessment test, the atmosphere in Class 1A had undergone a significant shift. The initial, boisterous camaraderie had been tempered by a new, sharp edge of competition. Students sized each other up, their minds replaying the incredible feats of the previous day, trying to calculate a new, more accurate power hierarchy. Izuku Midoriya, once a complete unknown, was now at the center of this silent re-evaluation. He was an enigma. He had placed 4th overall, yet his physical stats were, on paper, unremarkable. He had demonstrated a level of quirk control that was nothing short of breathtaking, yet the quirk itself was subtle, almost invisible. He was quiet and reserved, but the confrontation with Bakugo at the school gates, witnessed by several students from a distance, had painted a picture of someone with an unnerving, ironclad confidence. He was no longer the plain-looking one. He was the precision one, a puzzle that no one in the class had yet managed to solve. Izuku, for his part, was unfazed by the stares and whispers. He sat at his desk, his posture perfect, reviewing the morning's lessons on hero law with placid focus. To him, the attention of his peers was just another environmental variable, a collection of data points to be observed and catalogued. He noted the way Bakugo's furious glare was now tinged with a sliver of frustrated confusion, the way Ida seemed to be analyzing his every move, and the curious, respectful glances he received from Momo Yaoyorozu. The morning classes passed without incident. Then, after lunch, the classroom door was flung open with a dramatic flourish. I am coming through the door like a normal person. All Might stood there, his massive frame barely fitting through the doorway, his costume a vibrant explosion of primary colors. He was not, in fact, walking like a normal person, but striking a heroic, if slightly ridiculous, pose. The class, which had been in a state of post-lunch lethargy, instantly erupted. It's All Might. Incredible. He's really a teacher here. His Silver Age costume. So cool. Izuku watched the spectacle with a calm, analytical eye. He saw the brilliant, unwavering smile, the perfect posture, the sheer force of personality that captivated a room. But he also saw the faint, almost imperceptible tension in the hero's shoulders, the way his breathing, while deep, was just a fraction too controlled. He saw the clock ticking behind the icon. The sight filled him not with awe, but with a profound sense of borrowed time. Welcome, young heroes, to the most important class at UA High. Hero Basic Training. All Might boomed, marching to the podium. Here, you will learn the ropes of heroism through various trials, and for our first trial, we are going to jump right in with combat training. He pressed a button, and sections of the classroom walls slid open, revealing numbered cases. And to go with that, you need these, your very own hero costumes, designed based on your quirk registration forms and your own requests. Get changed and meet me at ground beta. The excitement in the room reached a fever pitch as students scrambled to find their cases. Izuku found his, case number 18, and picked it up. It was heavier than he expected, but perfectly balanced. He followed the others to the changing rooms, a quiet shadow in a sea of giddy excitement. At ground beta, a sprawling cityscape built for training simulations, the students of Class 1A emerged one by one, a vibrant tapestry of future heroes. Their costumes were a reflection of their personalities and quirks. Ida's knight-like armor, Uraraka's puffy, astronaut-themed suit, Bakugo's militaristic gear with grenade-shaped gauntlets. When Izuku stepped out, a hush fell over the group closest to him. His costume was a stark contrast to the bright, flashy designs of his peers. It was a masterpiece of tactical minimalism, born from the Yamakage philosophy. The primary color was a deep, non-reflective charcoal gray, with subtle accents of dark forest green. The material was a durable, flexible combat fabric that allowed for a full range of motion without making a sound. His torso was protected by a lightweight, form-fitting vest made of a composite material designed to stop small-caliber rounds and blades. It was segmented, ensuring it didn't hinder his agility. His arms were covered by reinforced gauntlets, and his legs by pants that were slightly looser, allowing for high kicks and complex stances, tucked into sturdy, soft-soled combat boots. Around his waist was a utility belt, but it wasn't bulky. It held several slim, dark leather pouches, the same ones from the exam, and sheaths for a dozen of his custom throwing knives, arranged for a quick, silent draw. The final pieces were a cowl that could be pulled up to cover the lower half of his face, and a pair of tinted, high-tech goggles that currently rested on his forehead. The overall impression was not of a hero, but of a shadow operative, a shinobi for the modern age. He looked sleek, dangerous, and brutally efficient. "Whoa, Midoriya," said a red-haired boy, Eijiro Kurishima. "Your costume is so manly. And kinda scary." "It is designed for functionality over aesthetics," Izuku replied, his voice slightly muffled by the high collar of his suit. He flexed his fingers, testing the grip of his gloves. Everything was perfect. All Might surveyed his class, his smile beaming. "They say the clothes make the hero, young ones. And you all look the part. Now, let's get started," he explained the trial. It would be a 2-on-2, indoor battle. One team would be designated as heroes, the other as villains. The villain's objective was to protect a nuclear weapon prop hidden in the building. The hero's objective was either to capture the weapon or apprehend both villains within the time limit. "Now for the teams. We shall choose them by drawing lots," All Might declared, pulling out a box. It was a classic method to force students to work with those they wouldn't normally choose, testing their adaptability. The teams were drawn one by one. Uraraka and Ida. Bakugo and a stoic, six-armed boy named Shoji. Then, All Might pulled out two more balls. Team D will be Izuku Midoriya. Izuku gave a slight nod. And Momo Yayorozu. Izuku's gaze shifted to the girl with the long, black ponytail. Yayorozu was the picture of refined elegance, even in her rather revealing hero costume. She looked surprised, her dark eyes wide for a moment, before she composed herself and gave him a polite, if hesitant, nod. He knew of her. She had gotten into UA on a recommendation, a testament to her incredible intellect and versatile quirk, creation. She was a strategic asset, perhaps the best in the class. A good draw. Finally, their opponents were announced. And the villains they will be facing are Team I. Shoto Todoroki and Mizo Shoji. A palpable tension filled the air. Todoroki, the silent prodigy who had frozen an entire building in the entrance exam and placed second in the quirk assessment, was considered by many to be the strongest student in the class. Shoji, with his dupli arms, was the ultimate reconnaissance man. It was a powerhouse team, combining overwhelming offense with perfect intelligence gathering. A battle of the recommendation students and the exam's top scorers. This should be a thrilling match. All Might boomed. Their match was slated to go third. As the first two teams prepared, Izuku turned to his partner. Yaoyorozu, he said, his voice low and focused. We have 15 minutes to prepare. Let's find a quiet place to formulate a strategy. Yaoyorozu looked momentarily taken aback by his directness, but then her expression sharpened with professional focus. Of course, Midoriya. Lead the way. They moved away from the main group, finding a spot behind one of the observation monitors where they could speak without being overheard. First, Izuku began, let's assess the known variables. Our opponents are Todoroki Shoto and Mizo Shoji. Their quirks are half cold, half hot, and diply arms, respectively. Correct, Yaoyorozu affirmed, crossing her arms. Todoroki possesses immense, large-scale offensive power, while Shoji's ability to create eyes, ears, and mouths makes him an unparalleled scout. They are a formidable combination of offense and information. She was already in her element, analyzing the situation with a keen mind. Precisely, Izuku agreed. Which presents our primary tactical problem. Shoji will know our location and composition from the moment we enter the building. We will have no element of surprise in terms of our approach. Todoroki, on the other hand, is the primary threat. Let's analyze his psychological profile and performance history. Yaoyorozu blinked. His psychological profile? A warrior's mindset is as much a weapon as their quirk, Izuku stated calmly, a lesson drilled into him by his father. From his performance in the quirk assessment and the entrance exam, what can we deduce? He favors overwhelming, large-scale attacks. He is efficient, bordering on ruthless. He aims to end conflicts instantly. There is no wasted movement, no showmanship. It is pure, logical application of force. He paused, his gaze becoming distant as he processed the data. Furthermore, there is the matter of his quirk. Half cold, half hot. The son of the number 2 hero, Endeavor. Yet, in every public display of his power, he has used only his ice. Never his fire. This suggests a deep-seated personal aversion to his left side. He is consciously, and perhaps emotionally, limiting himself to only half of his true power. Yaoyorozu's eyes widened. She was a genius, but her thinking was academic, based on quantifiable data. Izuku's analysis was something else entirely. It was the analysis of a hunter studying his prey. He was dissecting their opponent's very soul. Therefore, Izuku concluded, his voice dropping to a near whisper, we can predict his opening move with a 97.4% probability. The moment the trial begins, he will unleash a massive, building-wide ice wave. His goal will be to flash freeze the entire structure, immobilizing us and capturing the weapon in a single, decisive move. It is the most efficient, logical, and powerful opening gambit he has. It is a statement. Momo stared at him, her mind racing to catch up. He wasn't guessing. He had constructed a flawless logical argument based on observation and psychological deduction. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. She had thought she was the class's top strategist, but this quiet, intense boy was operating on a completely different level. Assuming your prediction is correct, she said, her voice now filled with a newfound respect, we would be frozen solid in the first 3 seconds. Which is why we will not be, Izuku said. A small, confident smirk touched his lips. We will be prepared. Yaoyorozu, your quirk, creation. You can create any non-living material or object, correct? Provided you understand its molecular structure. Yes, that's correct, she affirmed. The larger or more complex the object, the more time it takes and the more of my body's lipid cells it consumes. Excellent. We will require the following items. Izuku began to list them off, his voice a rapid-fire staccato of tactical needs. First, insulation. We need high-efficiency thermal layering for our boots and the core of our uniforms. Something thin but effective based on aerogel composites, perhaps. It needs to protect us from sudden, extreme temperature drops. Momo's mind immediately went to work, picturing the complex lattice of silica aerogel. Possible. It will take a few minutes, but I can create thin, self-adhering pads. Second, terrain denial, Izuku continued. Once the building is frozen, the floor will be a sheet of ice. A major mobility disadvantage. We need to negate that advantage for them. I need you to create caltrops. Small, four-pointed, made of tungsten carbide for hardness. About 200 of them. Caltrops? That's rather old-fashioned, she commented, though she was already visualizing the simple but effective design. Old-fashioned solutions are often the most effective. They are a low-tech answer to a high-tech problem. They will make rapid movement on the ice impossible for our opponents without specialized footwear, which they will not have. Third, sensory disruption. Shoji is their eyes and ears. We need to blind those eyes and deafen those ears. I require 2 magnesium-based flashbang grenades, non-lethal, of course, and 2 wideband sonic emitters. The emitters should produce a high-frequency sound at around 120 decibels, enough to overwhelm sensitive hearing without causing permanent damage. Momo's brow furrowed in concentration, her brain, a living supercomputer, accessing and processing the required schematics. The flashbangs are simple. The sonic emitters are more complex, but doable. What will you be doing while I create these? I am the primary offensive force, Izuku stated. However, my standard equipment is designed to be lethal. I will not use it in a training exercise. Therefore, I need non-lethal ammunition. I require high-density, vulcanized rubber bullets. Spherical, with a diameter of 20 millimeters. As many as you can produce in the time remaining. He had laid out a complete, multi-layered strategy in less than a minute. It was a plan that not only countered their opponent's strengths but also weaponized them. He was going to turn Todoroki's ice into a trap. Momo was, for the first time in a long time, completely and utterly impressed. There was no arrogance in his tone, only the cold, hard certainty of a master tactician at work. He wasn't just planning a mock battle. He was orchestrating a victory. All right, Midoriya, she said, a determined fire lighting in her eyes. Let's get to work. A faint shimmer of light began to emanate from the exposed skin of her arm. She closed her eyes, focusing her incredible mind. Small objects began to phase into existence from her skin, first a small, gray insulating pad, then a wickedly sharp, black caltrop. Izuku stood guard, his eyes scanning their surroundings, his ears listening for the progress of the other battles. He was a silent, gray and green sentinel, a stark contrast to the brilliant, creative light of his partner. They were a perfect team, the strategist and the forge. By the time All Might's voice boomed over the intercom, announcing that the second match was over and their turn was up, they were ready. Izuku's pouches were filled with hard rubber bullets instead of steel bearings. He had several flashbangs and sonic devices clipped to his belt. Thin, incredibly warm pads were affixed to the inside of their boots and uniforms. Momo looked a little pale, the exertion of creating so many complex items having taken a toll, but her eyes were bright with determination. Team D heroes, prepare to enter the building. Team I villains, you may enter and take your positions. Izuku and Momo walked towards the designated hero entry point, a large steel door on the ground floor of a 5-story office building prop. Final check, Izuku said quietly. Once we're inside, Shoji will locate us. Todoroki will unleash the ice wave. The insulation will protect us. I will deploy the caltrops with my quirk to cover the entire ground floor. You will use the flashbangs and sonics to cover our ascent. We move to the 4th floor, where the weapon is most likely located. It offers a good balance of defensibility and distance from the entry point. Understood? Understood, Momo confirmed, giving a small pouch of caltrops a confident pat. Let's show them what a well-laid plan can do. They stood before the door, 2 figures poised and ready. Inside, Todoroki and Shoji were likely setting their own trap, confident in their overwhelming power. They had no idea they were walking into one themselves. Hero team. Begin! The moment All Might's voice gave the signal, the world went cold. It was not a gradual drop in temperature. It was an instantaneous, violent theft of all warmth. A deep, groaning rumble vibrated through the building's foundation as ice, moving with the speed and force of a tidal wave, erupted from the building's core. Frost bloomed across the exterior walls in intricate, deadly patterns. The very air in front of them crystallized, a visible wave of frigid cold washing over them. Momo gasped, the sudden cold a physical shock. But her training and her trust in their plan held firm. The insulation pads kicked in, a small, welcome pocket of warmth against the brutal, encroaching frost. The ground beneath their feet was instantly coated in a thick, slick sheet of ice. From the observation room, the other students stared in horror at the monitors. "He froze the whole building," Kirishima exclaimed. "They're trapped. How are they supposed to fight in that?" All Might watched intently, a serious expression on his face. He knew the sheer power Todoroki wielded. He also knew the quiet, analytical mind of the boy he had chosen as his potential successor. This was the first true test of Izuku's philosophy. Back at the building, Izuku was perfectly calm. The cold was an inconvenience, nothing more. "Phase 1 complete," he murmured, his breath pluming in the frigid air. "Now for Phase 2. He reached into his own pouch of caltrops. He didn't just throw them. He held his hand open, palm up, and the wicked, four-pointed metal jacks lifted into the air, hovering like a swarm of angry insects. With a single, sharp gesture, he sent them flying through the building's now open doorway. His quirk guided them, scattering them in a perfectly even, wide distribution across the entire frozen ground floor. They skittered across the ice, settling with their sharp points facing upwards, almost invisible against the frosted surface. "Terrain is secured," he said. He looked at Momo. "Your turn." Momo nodded. She pulled the pin on a flash bang and tossed it into the doorway. A second later, a brilliant, searing flash of white light erupted from within, so intense it was blinding even from the outside. It was followed by the high-pitched, disorienting squeal of the sonic emitter she had thrown in right after it. "Go!" Izuku commanded. They burst into the building. The ground floor was a surreal, frozen wasteland. Everything, desks, chairs, computers, was encased in a thick layer of ice. The air was painfully cold, and the high-pitched whine of the sonic device was already fading. But the trap was sprung. Izuku's sharp eyes caught a flicker of movement by the stairwell. A duplicated arm of Shoji's, its eye blinking rapidly from the flash, was retracting. They had been spotted, as expected, but their senses had been compromised. "He's at the stairs," Momo called out. "Covering," Izuku replied. His hand was a blur. Thwip thwip thwip. 3 rubber bullets shot from his fingertips, guided by his quirk. They weren't aimed to injure, but to pin down. They struck the wall around the stairwell entrance with loud, smacking sounds, forcing Shoji to pull back rather than risk a direct hit. They reached the stairwell, their insulated boots giving them perfect traction on the icy steps, while the scattered caltrops behind them made any pursuit from the ground floor a treacherous proposition. They ascended quickly, silently. The building was an eerie, frozen tomb. The only sound was the faint crunch of their footsteps on the frosted stairs. As they reached the third-floor landing, Izuku held up a hand, signaling a halt. He closed his eyes, his senses extending. He wasn't just listening with his ears. He was feeling the vibrations in the air, the subtle shifts in temperature. "He's above us," Izuku whispered, his voice a low breath of mist. "4th floor. Exactly as predicted. And he's alone. Shoji must be guarding the weapon." The chapter in their textbook battle had closed. They had successfully weathered the storm, navigated the treacherous terrain, and were now closing in on their objective. They had breached the fortress. But now, the real test began. Now, they had to face the dragon in its lair. The chapter ended here, with the two heroes poised on the precipice of confrontation, the chill of the frozen building a pale imitation of the cold, overwhelming power that awaited them on the floor above.